Just ahead on American Black Journal, we're going to look at the reasons behind the decline in the number of black men pursuing medical careers. Wright Lassiter, president of the Henry Ford Health System, is here to talk about diversity in medicine. Plus, we're going to remember community activist Ron Scott. American Black Journal starts right now.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. It's predicted that the United States will have a shortage of up to 90,000 doctors by the year 2025. However, the number of black males in the physician pipeline is steadily declining. A report by the Association of American Medical Colleges shows the number of black males applying to medical school has not increased since 1978, when it stood at just over 1,400. The number of black male students in medical school has also dropped. There are several reasons for the decline, including a lack of financial and educational opportunities, as well as negative public perceptions of black men that impact their career progress. The issue of diversity in medicine is the focus of today's Liberation film series at the Charles H. Wright Museum. The event is free and features a movie and guest speaker, Wright Lassiter, who's president of the Henry Ford Health System. I'm pleased to have him as my guest here on American Black Journal. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So I guess I have to admit, I was surprised to see these numbers. When you think about the progress that has been made with regard to African Americans in higher education since 1978, you would think that medical school and medical school for African American males would be the same story as for other fields and people. Obviously it's not. Tell me why that's true.
Well, I think, Stephen, there's a number of factors. I've been in healthcare since 1989, and I've been around Texas, California, and now Michigan, and it's not surprising to me to see the data. And I think you have to think about a number of things going on in our society that contribute to it. I mean, I think first and foremost that African Americans, particularly in large urban settings, still have gaps in terms of educational access.
Sure.
When you think about career access and career opportunities, oftentimes you think about people doing things when they see others like them doing it. Mm-hmm. And you don't see a greater preponderance of African American male, particularly physicians. And when you look at higher education in general, what you see, particularly in terms of African Americans, you see more African American females matriculating to college than males.
Than males, sure.
And so when you think through those kinds of demographic factors, I think that's leading to some of the issues that we're seeing in that report.
Right, right. And so what are some of the things that you've got to do to try to reverse that? I mean, that's a long trend, 1978 till now. Sure. What are we missing?
Well, I think that one of the things that many folks are focusing very heavily on are pipeline programs. And there are a number of pipeline programs that exist across the country. And pipeline programs are generally intended to target individuals who would likely have interest and aptitude, but who may be unawares of that career as an opportunity for them because there's no one in their family, there's no one in their community who has pursued it. And so pipeline programs can begin as early as middle school, high school, and college. And frankly, as a student would progress in their educational career, the pipeline program becomes more sophisticated. In the middle school ranks, it's really focused on opening up that opportunity for you and saying, there are people like you that can do this career, you can do this career, no matter what your circumstances might be.
Right.
There are opportunities for you. Let's begin talking to you about what are the preparatory steps necessary. In high school, then, you begin to help them understand, well, what's it take to get into college and to be able to be successful in the kinds of academic studies that would lead to medical school. And then beyond that, you begin really pairing individuals with professionals and helping them understand, what's the trail that I've blazed, and so how do you do what I've done?
Right. Right. I have a sister who is a doctor, and I know one of the big things in her life, even now, years after she graduated is debt. The expense of medical school is really crushing. I imagine that plays a role here too.
It's a significant role. You know, I think it's one of the crises in this country that we don't talk a lot about. But the fact that you have people coming out of medical school with $200,000+ worth of debt is a disincentive for a lot of people. And so it certainly is one of the issues that we're trying to address. When you look at medical school preparation in other countries, you don't see the kind of crushing debt that people pursuing medical careers face in this country. And so it is a challenge, and frankly, it creates somewhat of a funnel for those who have the ability, either through family resources or other resources, to pursue the educational training versus those who really don't.
Yeah. So this event today at the Charles H. Wright Museum, you are speaking about this issue, right? About how to get more African American males interested in and prepared for careers in medicine. Well, you know, the movie Something the Lord Has Made is an interesting story.
That's the film that they're going to show. That's the film. It's an interesting story about two individuals, you know, one that's acclaimed Johns Hopkins surgeon and one who's not, who was very successful in terms of surgical procedures, you know, many years ago. And it begins in the 1940s, sort of talking about this journey of an individual who was a carpenter by trade, that was exposed to the medical field, not formally, and was very, very successful. What we're going to try to do at Charles Wright is highlight the issue for folks, and talk about things like getting African American males access to STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math programs at an early age. We're going to talk about pipeline programs. We're going to talk about what organizations are doing to try to foster greater numbers of African American males into the field of medicine. We're going to do a little reception with a number of trainees at Henry Ford Health System who are in medical training programs, residency training programs within our health system, and talk a bit about you know, what were their experiences and how can they help others come behind them. So.
I would imagine that there's also an effect of this issue and problem on medical care for the African American community. In other words, the dearth of African American male doctors probably does not help us with problems like the reluctance to see a physician in the black community, for instance, or the access to physicians in black communities.
Well, so when you think about healthcare, a buzzword that's much more than a buzzword is healthcare equity. And, you know, oftentimes just in the civil rights movement, the term equality was something that people fought very much for. And one of the things that we're saying today is that while equality is important, equity is even more important, because what equity suggests is that there's a need for cultural competence. There's a need to meet patients where they are. There is some truth to the fact that people look for people who they can associate with,
who they can relate to,
or are comfortable with. It's also very true that historically the stigma about medical care and the bias is that African American males don't seek care as frequently as other segments of our population. And so having greater diversity within the field certainly is helpful. When you think about things like prostate cancer, there have been a number of studies that have shown that if you're able to really provide culturally competent care, to reach out to African American males in a different way than the traditional process of come see your doctor. Maybe it's group visits with other African American males, things like that really play upon the unique characteristics of that individual. That is very, very important. And so to the extent that we have greater and greater diversity, when we think about the browning of America and how much diversity will become even more important in the next decades and beyond, it's really critical that we solve this issue.
You are new to our community, new to Henry Ford and to Detroit. You came to us from Oakland, California, and you will be taking over for Nancy Schlichting, who has been the CEO at Henry Ford for a long time. Talk to me about your impressions of our city, our community, but also of Henry Ford Health System and what you want to do with it.
You know, when I first began talking to Henry Ford Health System about coming here and taking this role on, I didn't know much about Detroit. And what I did know was probably more on the less than positive side
right.
than on the positive side.
We got a bad reputation.
we do. I will say that I had the pleasure, though, of when I took over the system in California, I hired a chief operating officer who was from Detroit.
Okay.
And so I had heard some things about Detroit, but frankly, not enough that would ever cause me to live here.
Yeah.
But when I came to visit the city, I was amazed at the spirit of perseverance. I was amazed at all of the development that was going on. I was amazed at this sense that this community was not going to die. It was not going to let itself fester, that it was really focused on upward movement. And so I've been wildly impressed in the last 11 and a half months with what I'm seeing here in terms of the spirit of the people, the welcoming nature, the entrepreneurial spirit, the level of innovation, and all those things, you know, frankly, some people outside the city might not be aware of. And when I then reflect that to Henry Ford Health System, I see those same kinds of core values. I see an organization that's wildly innovative, an organization that's fiercely focused on its community. I see people that work, our physicians and staff, that are just so focused on doing the right thing for our patients every day. And so it's been very exciting to be part of an organization that, on the one hand, is looking to do the best that it possibly can, the highest level of research and clinical care. But on the other hand, you know, start programs like our Women-Inspired Neighborhood Network that's focusing on infant mortality, our great focus on equity and inclusion. And so it's been a wonderful experience for me this last 11, 12
Well, and speaking of role modeling, I assume that you would be the first African-American to hold that position at Henry Ford.
That would be true.
So that pushes us also in that direction of having other people, giving people something to look up to and look forward to.
Sure. Well, I would say just not only in medicine, but in healthcare administration, there also is somewhat of a dearth
shortage,
of
absolutely,
diversity, and so it's great to be able to be a role model for others and to say to people that, you know, frankly, no matter where you come from, you have opportunities that are very vast.
Yeah. All right. The event is today at 3 p.m. at the Charles H. Wright.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you very much for being here, and good luck to you taking over Henry Ford.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Coming up next, American Black Journal remembers an early producer and host of this program, Ron Scott. But first, here's a look at some important moments in Detroit's Black history.
I'm Ken Coleman with a look back at African-American life in Detroit. This week in 1963, Mayor Jerome Kavanaugh declared December 8th Dick Night Train Lane Day. In 2008, U.S. Senator Carl Levin paid tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen, the famed African-American airborne unit that helped defend America during World War II. And in 1950, Ralph Bunche became the first Black to earn the Nobel Peace Prize. These are significant events this week in Detroit's Black history, taken from the book On This Day, African-American Life in Detroit.
If you lived in the Detroit area for any length of time, you're probably familiar with Ron Scott. He was a community and political activist who worked tirelessly for the causes he believed in. Ron founded the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality and was a co-founder of the Detroit chapter of the Black Panther Party. Ron passed away last week at the age of 68. In addition to his social and political network, he was an early producer and host of this program when it was known as Detroit Black Journal.
For any of you who have been around, say, for the last 25 years in America, then you know that there's been a phenomenon on the scene known as rhythm and blues, and rhythm and blues goes back farther than that. Eventually it goes back 400 years, maybe 1,000 years, depending on whether you look at Africa or America. But there's one person for the last 25 years who has been what you might call a living legend, a person who's done a lot for the business and a person who's done a lot for Black culture and for the culture of humanity. And that is James Brown. Good to have you here.
Nice to be here, and hey, I just listened to the opening, and I wonder do I really deserve all that, you know?
I would say so. I would say so.
You.
And you know, you can judge that just from the fact that when you walked in the studio, it was like, I don't know, how can you put it? It's like magic. I mean, you know, people just all of a sudden form around you to meet James Brown.
I think one of the things, I've been sincere, and I've been honest with what I had to say. And I'm very glad I didn't get a chance to get a formal education because, like we were talking earlier.
How far in school did you go?
7th grade.
Yeah. Shine shoes, right?
Right.
worked, did you say one time?
Sawmill, picking cotton, hoeing cotton, working hay.
Hard work.
Yeah, real hard work. Real hard work, you know. I was a juvenile delinquent at the age of 16, and I used to bust rocks and everything. I know the whole thing, and I'm glad I know it, because it gave me, we have a 7th grade education formally, but a doctor's degree in the street. You know? I know what it's about.
I'd like to welcome to Detroit Black Journal, and I'm sure all of the audience knows, and by now, in the next few minutes, you will know that our guest for tonight is one of the survivors of the struggle of the last 10 years. And I'm welcome to say, and I'm glad that Detroit Black Journal has an opportunity to have someone who has survived and who struggles so diligently for the people throughout this world. That's Bobby Seale.
Thank you.
Okay. You obviously remember those words that you said, and that was in Oakland sometime in the late 60s at Bobby Hutton Memorial Park.
Right.
What's happened since then, Bobby? I mean, what's going on?
A lot of things have happened. The struggle in this country, the total movement, it's happened in such a way that, well, I can say this here, the power structure got very slick about early 1970s. See, the power structure learned that over a 12-year period, they attacked the civil human rights aspect, they attacked the political revolutionaries, they attacked even the anti-war movement aspect, and the more they attacked, the more and more support we got. They got slick and realized suddenly that, let's stop attacking. And suddenly, one day, if you notice, there were no more attacks against any aspects of the movement in this country in the early 70s. That's one thing that's happened. That's what began to take the tide of the struggle in this country to what you call a low tide. Myself, in July 1974, I resigned from the Black Panther Party. And I told Brother Hugh, I said I was going to resign in about 3 to 4 months. And the party at that time had dwindled to something about like, I guess about close to 300 party members in the country.
That's down from, say, 10,000.
Down from 10,000, the peak 10,000 in 1969. In 1969, before I was arrested, put in jail, before the Chicago conspiracy trial occurred, before the murder trial that occurred in New Haven, where I was put up there, at that point, that was a heavy peak of the Black Panther Party.
All right, joining me now is one of Ron Scott's close friends, Dawood Raleed, Executive Director of the Michigan chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're not dressed like Ron Scott was in those clips. Neither am I. The very different times, but somebody who, as you can see there, was always really focused on the people of the city of Detroit, and the struggle against oppression and all of these other sort of tyrannies that black people and other people suffer in this country.
Oh, no doubt about it. Ron Scott was definitely a pioneer in our community. He actually attended the University of Michigan prior to affirmative action being put in place, being a student activist and one of the few African Americans on that campus back in the 60s. And then he's, as you mentioned, was a co-founder of the Black Panther Party. And one very important thing that Ron worked on that I came to learn about him over the years is that when police brutality was at a epic rate in the city of Detroit, especially prior to Mayor Coleman Young being the mayor, Ron was very instrumental in getting the police commission instituted into the city in 1974, in which there would be oversight,
citizen voice.
Exactly, a citizen voice over the activities of the Detroit Police Department, which was perhaps the most notorious in the United States of America.
Yeah. It is somewhat ironic that Ron's death happens at the same time we are seeing really vivid images for the first time, I think, of the kind of brutality that he fought against for years. And there's a sense among some people that it may be more frequent now. I think more to the point, it's just more documented. We're seeing it more frequently because everyone's got a camera. And so we're aware of what is going on. Just this week, of course, we have seen more of that kind of issue boil over in Chicago, where the police killed a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old man for apparently no reason. Ron spent his life trying to get people to focus on this.
No doubt about it. And actually, we were together at a protest and a rally early this year in Inkster, related to Floyd Dent, who was brutally beat down by an Inkster police officer, so-called RoboCop.
Yeah.
And I remember during that rally that Ron specifically said this has always taken place in our country, but now we have technology of dash cams and police cars, and more importantly, citizen journalism through smartphones are now catching a lot of this violence, like even what just took place recently in San Francisco, where there was a young black man who was shot down with multiple shots by the police department.
Yeah. What did Ron say was the solution to these problems? I mean, here's somebody who was focused on it for a really long time, saw it change. There's no question we're not dealing with the same thing in the city of Detroit as we were when we had stress before Coleman Young was elected mayor, but we're dealing with different kinds of issues between the police and the community. What did Ron think was the way to solve those?
Well, I heard Ron talk about this multi-pronged. One, he talked about that there need to be a very deliberate cultural shift inside police departments, and it's not simply about writing policies, but there is a cultural shift that needs to take place, whereas the police department and the blue wall or a curtain of silence has to be broken. This is a cultural thing. He also talked about the very important need that there has to be citizen oversight over law enforcement authorities, and we can't trust the police to police themselves. And as we saw what took place in Chicago with Laquan McDonald, we simply cannot trust the police to police themselves. The third issue, though, that many people don't know about Ron's work is he was leading up an initiative called Peace Zones for Life, which is related to community engagement, as he said, putting the hood back in neighborhood and really for the community to be involved in community policing and the community to be more outspoken and taking more ownership over what's going on in the streets, because at the end of the day, it's the people of the communities that have to be the first line in making sure the community is safe and being functional. It's not just the police job.
Right, right. I think a lot of people mistakenly characterize this kind of work as anti-police. I think Ron was a really good example of not being anti-police. He was pro-citizen, pro-community, and saw the path to solving these problems as a coming together of the police department and the community, a recognition of the fact that they have to be together, they have to be working as one in order to keep people safe and to keep police from overstepping their bounds.
Definitely, and when Ron was working very closely with our organization in terms of the FBI fatally shooting Imam Luqman Abdullah back in 2009, he was specifically saying that he said, I am not anti-law enforcement, but I am anti-law enforcement misconduct. And this was the message that he put out to the FBI. But I heard him say this many times relating to Saginaw Police, Detroit Police, FBI, or ICE, in which earlier this year, Terrence Cullum was fatally shot by
Border Patrol.
Yeah, Immigration Customs Enforcement.
Yeah, yeah. So what happens to his work now, now that he's gone? What's the way to sort of carry that on in our community?
Well, really, there's going to have to be a group of people and concerned citizens to fill in the gaps. Someone like Ron Scott, who's been involved in this work for over 40 years, his expertise. I don't think there's any.
You don't come by it on the street corner, on every street corner.
There's not really one person that's going to be able to fill his shoes, but there needs to be a group of people who rally around some point and to help energize or try to fill in the gaps of the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality, because we know that more than ever that there needs to be a citizen voice in keeping the law enforcement accountable here in southeastern Michigan, and we can't afford to let Ron's valuable work die with him.
Yeah, I mean, he was instrumental recently in getting the police commission reinstated. It was abrogated during the bankruptcy. He and other people spoke out about the need to keep that going. I would imagine that some of those folks will now sort of, again, rally to that point and keep pushing, because there's more work to do.
There's definitely more work to do, but as I said before, Ron was a person that was down at that police commission meeting every week. He always was bringing up the voice, raising up the concerns of the people. And what many people also don't know is that Ron dealt with so many cases, and a very small, minuscule percentage of the cases that he ran across would ever go public. Many of the cases that he dealt with, he never went to the media. He tried to mediate these things behind closed door. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. He will be missed. And thank you for being here to remember him.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can also hear our program on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.